evolution. You might talk about, for instance, like work songs leading to blues songs to rock and roll or whatever. But yeah, that's basically taking the place and more of paper of the reaction paper number two.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. So I know your blood pressure can just go right down now. You can think about I've got a
Yeah.
little bit of time, but now realize this other project is a little more heavily weighted, and it is a big deal. We're going to start, like I say, next week, giving a little class time to you guys, so you can just kind of start putting this together. You're going to be creating a video and shooting it to me, probably through YouTube, whatever format works best for you.
Fair enough. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm still disappointed we don't have any. Okay, now we're getting some more. Now we're filling up. I can see it now.
Yeah, right. I'm gradually letting folks in out of the.
Yeah, I mean, there may be a few that it takes a few moments to click, because they'll see something different. Just take a little while to register. They'll check their emails if they need to, I'm sure. But
okay,
we're typically 19, 20, something like that in students.
Okay, great. And I'll be, if you can remind me, Jeremy, just to make sure that I go here, you know what I'm going to do? Oops. I'm going to make you a co-host.
Oh, sure.
And I think that one thing that allows you to let people in out of the waiting room.
Oh, okay. So if I see people waiting, I can just.
And if that doesn't work, just let me know, and I'll find myself to the participants list and make sure everyone's in.
Okay, now they will be listed. The waiting room. This is a dumb question, but I've not done this. The people in the waiting room. This is showing on my participants list. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I will keep
Take
watching.
a look at that, and if that's
not seeing a waiting room right now, so they must be all in. Let's see.
Yeah, I think we're clear at this point. Looking, this is a great group. Lots of folks.
You're gonna love them. I'm telling you what. We have a blast.
All right. Well, great. Well, I'm about ready. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we should go. If you want me to, I'll kind of just tell the students what's going on, and you can take over here, Lee. Students, today we're in for a real treat. We have a gentleman here who's accomplished in so many fronts. I'm not going to take the time to tell you about all of them. I don't even know them all, but he's a very accomplished instructor and musician. He the only man I know personally who produced a movie, but he has done so, and it's been released, and he's written a book to accompany this about bluegrass music in the Czech Republic. He's done lots of important research work. He's a strong part of our department, and he, not least of these pursuits and accomplishments, has headed up for many years the ETSU Mandolin Orchestra, and that's what he's going to talk about today. So I'm talking about Mr. Lee Bidgood here, and we're going to let him take over. He's the boss today, so you guys be attentive and ask questions and pay close attention and make the most of this.
Great. Well, thanks, folks, and hopefully everyone can hear me, and I'm not getting too loud or anything. It's an honor to be here. Thanks to Jeremy for asking me to take part in the class with y'all. And I'm excited to share with y'all this part of history that I really didn't know a whole lot about until I was an undergrad, and maybe in the point where some of you all are. And I was interested in the mandolin, and I started to learn more about the history of fretted instruments like the mandolin. And I started to learn all this really interesting stuff about the history. And so and here I am. And then we have our own mandolin orchestra here at ETSU. So I'm just going to give you all a big old historical overview. And along the way, since, as I was telling Jeremy, that we don't really have the mandolin orchestra going on right now because of our current situation. I'm hoping to get something going for next semester. But in the meantime, I have some recordings of the group from other periods of time, so I can share those with you. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Let me see. Someone's chatting something. Something's chatting. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to share my computer sound. And just to let you know, again, we are live streaming on Facebook. I hope that's all right with folks. And one thing to note, y'all are all very well versed in how to do this. Just make sure you keep your cameras and your microphones off to keep things clean. And then, but if you have a question, please raise a hand or put something in the chat. Jeremy, if you could keep an eye on that too, let me know if folks have questions along the way. And I will be stopping at various points along the way to ask you all some questions. So keep your ears peeled and be ready to, you know, pop back up again with your microphone if there's something that you can add to the conversation. So here we have this funny picture of these people dancing around and playing on a fretted instrument here that kind of looks like a mandolin, as some of us might recognize, and it kind of doesn't. But I wanted to use this image because I think it points to the origin of the mandolin and the mandolin family of instruments as a folk instrument, as a vernacular instrument. I'm sure y'all have come across these terms so far this semester. So I wanted to start by playing y'all a piece that on the mandola. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the mandola is actually the root of this whole instrument, and it's I think anyhow, there's more to be said. So I'll play y'all a piece that's actually not Italian, but it's around the Adriatic Sea in the Balkans. This is a Bulgarian vernacular dance piece called a ruchenica, and it's in it's in a 7/8 time signature, which is kind of funky, but it's a vernacular folk dance rhythm from that part of the world. All right, so you could kind of imagine that that's something that could go along with this image. Now this is more the imaginative, the idealized image of the origins of the mandolin. And if we wanted to get a little more technical, we could. Oh, come on, computer! Uh-oh, I think we're a little. I may have overwhelmed my computer. There's so much going on here. Oh dear.
It was the pick and blew it away is what it was. It was like great playing.
It happens so rarely for me. I should be pleased. Okay, this is all right.
I find that happening sometimes too. Once you start sharing your screen, it does have a tendency for some reason for the computer to lock up. We get the same problem from time to time.
Right. Okay, I'm going to stop the share.
Yeah, sometimes I do that and then start it again.
Let's try that again. Okay, let's see if that works. No, not quite. Okay, let me try something else. Sorry, y'all. All right, are y'all seeing the happy banjo player, or are you seeing my my desktop here?
We're just seeing black. I'm seeing your picture and black.
That is something either. Okay, well, let me see. Sorry, y'all.
This is a problem. It really is with it. It happens. I wouldn't say terribly often, but it does happen sometimes with mine too. And I end up, like I say, usually once I back out, we're good. But
All right. Well, I think there's something wrong with preview. Let me try that. I'm gonna get my slideshow going here again. I think there's something wrong with the. All right, let's try it again. All right. So as I was saying, the that that image of the prancing around, the playing of the instrument there is kind of what we think of. I'm sure y'all have talked about these imaginative or more emotionally inflected versions of roots music or of history. And there are also more technical ones. And so if this were all working, I would be showing you a chart that shows all the different versions of the mandolin as it developed from medieval Renaissance times through the 1800s, when it was more formalized into the form that we know it in in its bowl back form. And I would love to show that to you.
We
And
talked about these mandolins the other day. Do any of you students remember what the slang term that so many people call it around here is? Who knows what I'm talking about? Do you remember, students? No. Tater bugs.
right, there was a because of the darker and lighter ribs on the
Right.
back of the round back, they were called that by. I think some people told me that was started by some folks that I'll be talking about in a little bit from the Gibson Company who wanted to discredit this form of the
Makes sense.
instrument. Here we go. Let me try this again one more time. I think I've restarted about all I can restart here without restarting absolutely everything.
It looks different.
Yeah. Okay. How's that look?
Great.
Here's the chart I was talking about. So a lot of different forms. There's more to be said about that, but let's move on. I want to talk about a guy named Carlo Munier. And Munier, he was born in 1859. And so at this point, the development of the mandolin, we have these bowl back instruments. They're played with other kinds of instruments, including timpani and cellos and harps and some kind of keyboard instrument here in Italy. And they're called Circolo Mandolinistico. All right, that's a mouthful for you, but it was a big thing. This is the Royal Circolo Mandolinisti of the Queen Margherita. And so during the 19th century, Munier was one of these people, and he was a part of the Queen's group. So this was not like a marginal thing. It was right up there, but with the ruler of the country. She's there posing with them there in the picture. So he also was big in creating publications, and we'll be talking more about publications that make all this happen. And if you've ever bought a Mel Bay How to Play Guitar book, which I did when I was younger, you'll recognize this page, which is very similar to a lot of these publications we know now, more than 100 years later. How do you hold it? How do you hold the pick? Where do you put your left hand? So one of the other things that he did was to take the mandolin and the existing larger mandola, and he also developed the liuto, which is here in the picture, to make the group of instruments together seem more like a quartet of stringed instruments like the violin, viola, and cello. And so he helped refine and elevate the mandolin so it was more serious and taken more seriously by other folks. You can see these folks look pretty darn serious in their suits and with their instruments there. And so let me just play for y'all just a sense here. This is the mandola. Here are the open strings. C, G, D, A. That's equivalent to the viola if you're counting at home. And then here's the mandolin. G, D, A, E. There also exists a Mando Cello. I'll be talking about that in a little bit. So Munier was really influential. He was just a big person in that period of time in the second half of the 19th century. Now, meanwhile, other developments were brewing. The allure of the mandolin and mandolin-like instruments was really evidently really strong because it was making a phenomenon. So this is an image of 1878 when groups of students Spanish students in their academic garb, which is kind of like what we wear now at graduation. We wear those black robes and such. That's kind of like what these students wore all the time. It's kind of like Hogwarts, except these guys had tambourines, guitars, violins, and an Iberian instrument played in Portugal and Spain called the banduria. So there was the guitarra and the banduria, and they were important in these kind of student groups. So this was in Paris in 1878. And there's accounts of these students just carrying on and just doing a lot of fun stuff. And so that led to a fad in these kinds of instruments. And you see, everyone looks like they're having a great time. And so this really became a thing. Now, one thing that you notice, this is not a bowl back mandolin. This is more of a banduria type instrument with a flat top and a flat back, like the Spanish guitar, which is how people referred to the guitar during this period. So to distinguish it from the Viennese guitar or other forms of the guitar. So we'll be talking about various fads for the instrument, and this is a big one here in the second half of the 19th century. And here you can see this is a French town, and people had an estudiantina, so they were using the Spanish term for this kind of fretted instrument group here with various forms of bowl-back mandolin, not the Portuguese form of the mandolin. So it's all kind of confused up, all these national origins and forms of instruments. But clearly, there was, as historians, we can look back and see there was something going on. Now, the next person I want to talk about is a gentleman named Carlos Corti. Like Munier, he was born in Italy, but he arrived in the United States around 1875. And 5 years later, he saw the opportunity to imitate one of the great acts of his day, the Estudiantina Figaro, or the Estudiantina Figuera, also called the Spanish Students. This costumed dancing banduria playing group from Spain was touring in the United States and the UK and South America in the early 1880s. So the global touring economy of music was going on strong then. So Corti made his own version of the Spanish Students and started touring with them. He got a bunch of Italian guys who played the mandolin, and they advertised themselves as the Spanish Students. And so oddly enough, it's through this sort of masquerade and fakery that the mandolin had its first real popularity here in the United States. Interestingly enough, Corti, here you see music by Carlo Corti. He also made songs about being at home in Ireland. He also went to Mexico and developed an orchestra típica to play traditional Mexican music. So one thing that I take from his story is that the mandolin can be used, it can be adapted to all sorts of different situations, different places, different repertories, and a lot of different styles of music. So meanwhile, another gentleman named Giuseppe Pettine had settled in Providence, Rhode Island in the United States, and he was continuing Munier's effort to elevate and refine the mandolin. He looks so poised to do it in this photograph, doesn't he? He's like, I'm going to do it. We are going to make this like the fanciest, most respected, most technically challenging instrument out there. He published several pieces. He published a method book teaching all of these technical developments that he was thinking of and performing himself as a performer. One of the things that he really liked to do was the duo style. That's a really sloppy version of it, but it was a way to play multiple lines on one instrument. Anyhow, that's what Pettine is known for, among other things. So I wanted to just skip over this right now and play a piece of music that we did with the ETSU Mandolin Orchestra. And it is by a gentleman named Juventina Rosas. While I'm doing that, anyone have any questions or observations at this point? All right. Well, let me lay this on you. This is a video that we took in 2018 with the ETSU Mandolin Orchestra, and this piece is called Over the Waves, Sobre las Ondas. The thing is, I found it in an edition from 1906, I believe. It was printed for Mandolin Orchestra in 1906. It was called Über den Wellen, which is a German translation of the title. So it's definitely a reminder that this whole phenomenon was all over the world, transnational in a lot of different ways. So this and so for us looking back on it, it's very exciting. There's all different things that we can draw from. And Juventina Rosas is a really interesting character as well. He's a indigenous Mexican person and really influential composer. If you look up his tune Over the Waves, you can see it's been performed by folks all over the world. It's one of the most common tunes globally, I think. If we were going to do that, I don't know how you would actually do that. Well, let me play this for you. Can y'all see this here now?
Yeah, looks good.
All right. Let me make it bigger and we'll play it for you. I won't do the whole thing, but you'll get the idea and you'll probably recognize the tune once I start playing it. Over the Waves. All right, we'll pause it there. Does anyone know that tune, or is there a name that y'all know that tune by?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know any other name for it.
Okay.
It sounds very familiar to me too, but I can't put a finger on where I've heard it.
I think there's some version of this. It's like, man, oh, the loveliest night of the year. I could hear that. Alan. But it's. I think there's like a man on the flying trapeze or something. There's something about the circus in there. So it's often played at circuses. You might have, if you've been to a circus, you might have heard it. No, it's not Strauss. It's by this an indigenous composer from Mexico named Juventina Rosas. So look it up, Over the Waves or Sobre las Olas. So anyhow, that's a fun focus that we've had with the Mandolin Orchestra in past few years, is to play Latin American compositions, and I'll be playing a few more of those for you. Now, let's go back to our let's see if I can go back to our slideshow here. And So here's the Polytechnic and People's Palace Mandolin and Guitar Band. This is London, 1899. I know, I'm sorry to do this, but I'm jerking y'all all over the world. But in this period of time, again, everyone's doing this. The Crystal Palace there in the background hosted this huge array. Look at all these ladies. They're mostly basically women holding mandolins and guitars. And there's some young ladies there too, right? Notice the refinement again. These are maybe middle class, but also working class ladies who had more leisure time and more income with the changes of the Industrial Revolution that had been happening for a while by that point. Around 1900, the growing middle class had more resources, but they also found more stresses in factory work and in pollution in cities, and increased mechanization and in traffic, right? They actually had road rage now where they hadn't had it potentially before. So folks sought relaxation and refinement, and many of them found them in being part of a mandolin club. It was a way to get ahead in the world, to have social capital, to meet other people. It was just an accepted thing that you would do. And so one thing I'll ask you all a little bit, like, what are some of the ways that you all do these kind of things? Jeremy was saying that not a lot of y'all are necessarily musicians, but there are other ways that I think we make networks, we connect with people and find ways to do the things we want to happen in the world, in this sort of civil society or club society. So another way we can look back on this period of time is to look at publications. And we've seen instructional books so far, but there's another kind of publication, and that's the newsletter or the magazine. So in 1894, a gentleman named Clarence Partee founded the Cadenza in Kansas City. And then in 1908, Philadelphia teacher and publisher Herbert Odell started the Crescendo, which we see here, which was the official publication of the Guild of Mandolinists, Banjoists, and Guitarists, which sounds like pretty official. I like that. It's all pretty highfalutin, just like this title page of the magazine. Odell also wrote a book called The Mandolin Orchestra, which is subtitled A Book for Directors, Managers, Teachers, and Players. It was a 90-page manual published in 1913. It covered everything from instrumentation and conducting style to effective programming of pieces at performances and proper stage behavior. They also have this really interesting section of the book where it advises the director on how to get your group to dress up so they look nice. And he has a lot of rough things to say about how men think that they should dress in suits. And he also has a funny little bit where they advise people to dress up like Italian peasants, which is maybe an option for some of our performing groups. But so this is my question for y'all. What are some of the ways that y'all now get together with other people who have similar interests, some way to blow off steam with other people together? It doesn't have to be musical, but are there any ways that y'all do that? I guess one way that people talk about this is civil society or organizational niche groups. Can y'all name any of those things that you're involved with?
I know they do something other than study. I know they do.
Yeah, like
We're just too scared to admit it.
You can't say that it is, huh?
like being on an intramural sports team or a mountain biking club or
debate team.
Yeah.
I'm in choir.
Yeah, there you go. And the choirs are these are choirs for instruments, that we've been looking at. So it's really similar. Sure, a church choir or civic choir, or if you were living in Pittsburgh, you might be in a Ukrainian choir, So there's a lot of these different kinds of ways that people have shared interests, or sometimes these are ethnic commonalities that people might have, shared language or national origin or something like that, or occupation. There are miners' choirs in Wales, I know, and other sorts of occupational things, musical groups and other groups. Anyhow, so I hope that's helpful for y'all to think about, back then, these organizations functioned like that for folks. And these publications were a big way that people all over the country and the world, I suppose, could keep up to date on what was going on with the Crescendo. You can see here the most popular monthly music magazine published in the interest of people involved with the mandolin orchestra and these kindred instruments. So it was very important, I think, for the community of people who were involved in this fad. Now, the cadenza lasted until 1924, and the crescendo shut down in 1933. So there, I think we can see the end of the fad in the United States. The Dayton Mandolin Orchestra website puts it this way: suddenly, or so it seems looking back, the mandolin orchestras died. The delineating point was World War I. The beauty and serenity of mandolin music could not hold the interest of soldiers who had been in a war. They looked for something louder and more raucous, and they found it in jazz music. One of the really interesting characters in this history is a guy named James Reese Europe. He was African American. I think he was born in the DC area. He eventually ended up working in music in New York City in the first decade and a half of the 1900s. And here you see him with his Clef Club Orchestra. The Clef Club functioned in some ways like a musical union for African American musicians of a higher quality. And here you see this, I don't know, tons of people, and they're all playing all these different instruments. We have some cellos, we have basses, we also have harp guitars and banjo mandolins, and I'll be talking about them in a little bit. We have fancy Gibson style mandolins. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. So this is a fascinating bunch of instruments all together, all played by African American men circa 1911. At this period of time, James Reese Europe was one of the most sought after social and dance music musicians with his band. They were playing for the Vanderbilts, the Astors. The Vanderbilts, like those are the folks that built Biltmore in Asheville, one of the most wealthy families in the whole country, maybe the world at that time. So he was at the upper echelon of professional musicians back then. And it's so interesting that he was playing it on these mandolin family instruments, at least partially. And so I suggest you look him up. He's a fascinating guy. He has a little bit in the jazz documentary by Ken Burns. It's a really nice little segment. So if you seek that out, there's a really interesting part about that. But this is one of the last places in mainstream popular culture that we see, especially at the top of pop culture, we see African-American people playing the banjo. And they're also playing the mandolin. So these are these kindred instruments that are talked about. The BMG banjo mandolin guitar movement that is this fad that happens circa 1900. And so I wanted to talk some about the banjo. Now, one of the things that's been happening in the second half of the 1800s is a parallel elevation and refinement of the banjo. We go from the banjo being an instrument played by enslaved people of African origin and African American origin in the Americas, the banza, the banjar that Thomas Jefferson noticed that played amongst enslaved people on his plantation / labor camp in Virginia. And so the white people took this instrument, and y'all, I hope, have talked about the minstrel show and its foundational role in establishing American popular music, and also the stereotypes that were part of that, and the extensive and corrosive elements of that whole thing. But one thing that comes out of that is these really sparkling and super looking banjos. So in the hands of tinkers and manufacturers, the banjo became this article of Gilded Age splendor, like these presentation banjos that cost $125 in the 1880s. That's a lot of money back there in 1880, right? So one thing you notice also from this ad is there's the presentation banjo that looks like that lion's going to bite your hand off if you go up too high up the neck. We also see the banjarine. And that's something that this guy, S.S. Stewart, did with his company, is create different sizes of the banjo. Just like Carlo Munier was doing in the same period of time, he was making a family of instruments. And I think that helped legitimize the instrument, make it fancier if it had a whole family to keep it company. And you could have then an orchestra made up of all the different sizes. So that's a just an interesting aspect to this. Now, one thing that I studied going back to the beginning, this is one thing that interested me when I was in your position as an undergraduate student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I was interested in the tenor banjo, which is kind of an offshoot thing. Um, and I was wondering how it came about. And then I learned it's because there was a fad in the mandolin area. And then we see this ad. Now tell me, what's the relationship? Like what is the manufacturer here, JB Shaw from Chicago? Like what are they taking advantage of? Who are they trying to reach and why? You see there's mandolin players at the top. Okay, that's an easy question. But if you can read this ad, can you tell what benefit this instrument might give mandolin players? Oh, is it hard to read?
It's hard to read. You can read the top part, but I'll give them a clue. It would have to do with sort of the discussion we had about courses on Tuesday, if you can remember. So it would relate to that. Remember what we said about the courses?
It only has 4 strings as opposed to the 8 of the mandolin, right?
Yeah. But what did we say about the courses?
Weren't the strings like there were like 2 of them very close together?
Exactly. And what do you do with the two that are close together? What does a performer do? They treat them as one, right?
Right. And so
Uniform.
here we have a banjo that takes the 4 courses of the mandolin string and just puts them down to 4, simplifying it. And here you can, I can read the ad, right? It says it has 4 strings and is tuned like a mandolin and plays with a pick like a mandolin. To play this instrument, it's not necessary for a mandolinist to learn a new system of fingering. A mandolin or violin score can be played. And so there's another ad that I couldn't find here. It's actually up on the wall here. During this period of time, a lot of banjoists were employed in theater orchestras and eventually in silent films to provide music. And the banjo was really better than the mandolin because it was louder. And if you played a banjo with a pick, it was even louder. And there's this hilarious advertisement that said, banjoists learn to play the banjo with a pick and get some of this easy money. So it's like a very, very pointed, like if you play the banjo with a mandolin style, you will make money. So I don't know if that was actually true, but it shows that, there was some motivation on various parts of here to make this happen. So so that was happening in the commercial centers, but I wanted to go back and focus on the communal atmosphere or the community aspect of this. And I'll just show you, I think it's really interesting to look at pictures of these groups that were going on. Here we see there's some mixed with banjos and mandolins and banjo mandolin hybrids. The banjo mandolin is like this. This is one made by the Vega Company in the United States. So you can see it's got 4 courses, 8 strings, but a mandolin body. So it's kind of like an unholy marriage of the two. And I'll show you something here. This is another thing that happens around this period of time called the tenor guitar. So you can see instead of the normal 6 strings of a guitar, it's got 4. And it's got a guitar body. So there were a lot of tinkering and instrument hybridization was going on in this period of time. I'll probably step on that later. So you can see there's all these different forms of these different instruments. We have ladies, we have gents, we have men, we have I haven't really seen any Mando cellos here yet, but we have seen regular cellos here. So this is from the University of Illinois, the Princeton Banjo Club, the Northwestern University Banjo and Mandolin Club, MIT. There are some younger folks here. We have mixed groups from different generations. So these kind of groups could be really inclusive community groups. And they could also be places where people could reinscribe boundaries of class and race and other things as well, privilege. So here you can see a banjarine. Here's some younger folks, super dapper looking gents there. And and here's this gets us to another kind of group around the time. Has anyone familiar with the musical The Music Man? I am, because
Yes.
nice. All right. I was in it as a kid, and so I played someone like these little guys. I didn't get to wear a sweet uniform like these folks have, but I had a little sackbut, which is like a miniature old-fashioned trombone, and I thought it was hilarious. But the story of The Music Man is that this shyster comes into town and tries to sell these people all these band instruments, and saying that band music is the way of the future, and it's takes place in this period of time that we're talking about. But there really was a big business in these kinds of bands, and it's here that we can see this intersection of community and commerce, because there really were a lot of ways that the people who were manufacturing the instruments wanted to support the community movement of mandolin orchestras, because that meant they would sell more instruments, right? So there's an interesting interaction between all the players. So if I can, let me stop the share, and I'm going to play y'all another piece from the ETSU.
Just for a second, too.
Sure.
You had a comment that said maybe it may need to be a little louder. Is there a way to raise the volume a little bit, or maybe it may be one student? Would other students agree with that? Or
I think it's fine. I think it was in reference to another topic earlier on.
okay, good. I mean, it's fine for me. I just want to make sure, but I noticed the comment. So unless somebody else mentions it, we'll say it's good. I'm fine with it.
Okay. Oh yeah, it's hard when I'm sharing my screen to see all these comments. Yeah, college ministry involvement.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So let me pull up here the whole.
Another avenue for him too might be the shape note. I don't know if Kalia is going to be teaching the shape note course again, but she did that a semester or two ago. But the shape note singing, as we've been talking about, is certainly something that a lot of people do to socialize. Some of these students may feel like joining us in that.
Yeah, that's another one of these examples. Absolutely. So let me see if I can share my screen here as a way, and I'll get y'all to listen to this recording. This is one we made in 2017, and this was published by A.J. White, who was a big music publisher in that period of time, and he published this in 1907 as Hometown Band. And when I saw this music, I thought, well, okay, I like a string band. But then we started playing it, and it sounded like something else. I think it may remind you of those orphans we saw with those brass instruments. So take a listen here. I won't play the whole thing, but I'd just like y'all to tell me what you're hearing here in how we're playing this music. What does it make you think of? All right, any takers? If you were going to caricature this as something, would you call it like, I don't know, oompa? It's not the most inspiring piece of music, I know.
Italian.
Like
Yeah,
a
that's
mix
Yeah, I can hear that.
To me, it's like a mix of Mary Poppins and Lady and the Tramp. I don't know why.
Yeah, we can identify so many things by naming Disney movies. That's really true. So this, I think it's meant to evoke a brass band, right? Which actually kind of makes me think of Mary Poppins, the cartoon part where they're in there. It's like supercalifragilistic. Right, that's just my one person imitation of a brass band. So I I think this was supposed to imitate a brass band, but it really, the notation from 1907 is for a mandolin orchestra. So it's this interesting way that these phenomenon are put together. All right, let me get us back to our slideshow because I want to show y'all some more documents that have to do with the companies that were involved with this, especially in making instruments. So in 1900, a company named Lyon and Healy, whose company we see, or catalog we see here, boasted, quote, "At any time you can find in our factory upwards of 10,000 mandolins in various stages of construction." The Sears and Roebuck and Montgomery Ward catalogs were selling these instruments hand over fist. These supertone mandolins and guitars are all over the place. I don't know how many of them were made, but tons of them. You could drown in them. And attempting to beat the competition, the Gibson Company sent their representatives all over the country and tried to encourage sales of mandolins and establish mandolin orchestras. So to talk about the Gibson Company, which is very important, first we need to talk about this serious looking character right here. I would not want to run into this guy in a dark alley. Looks like he's got some sort of firearms hidden under his woolly coat there. This guy is Orville Gibson. He was, I think we could pretty much say with certainty, he was a little eccentric. But he was also maybe a genius. He had at least we can say he had some really innovative and I think really useful ideas about the mandolin. He began designing instruments young in life. He was born in 1856 and was working professionally as a builder in the 1880s. And in 1898, he was granted a patent for a new kind of mandolin, one that does not have the round back of the Italian style, and it doesn't have the flat back of the banduria or the Iberian or Spanish Portuguese style. It is different. Does anyone have a guess? Maybe y'all talked about this, where this construction technique was taken from? It's modeled on another kind of instrument. Any guesses?
Is it off like a regular orchestra instrument, like a violin or? Okay.
Exactly. So good job, Maddie. This is the idea here is that the instrument is not a flat piece of wood, but it's a thicker block that's carved to create the round thing. There are some archtop instruments that are pressed, but these were actually carved just like a violin or a cello. And it's more expensive to make, it's more involved, but the acoustic qualities of the instrument are a lot different. They're potentially more rich overtones and better projection out of this kind of solid wood archtop instrument. So these instruments, this is a 1905 A4 instrument that he made. And this really was a new thing. And these are instruments that I find more satisfying, more acoustically superior, more versatile than the other forms of the mandolin. This is the really fancy one. This is an F2 from 1902. And it really has these curves. You can see there's these little swirls and the points. It makes it look like you could hold it and bash somebody on the head with it. It's got curves up here. This is the F style here. You can see the curve back. One of the things that he seems to have been really fascinated with was decoration. And here you can see these handle inlaid tuners, the tuner buttons on this one, and also the star and crescent inlay, which was really a part of what he thought was cool. So that was the cool symbol he wanted to put on the headstock of the instruments he made. Now, very odd, we moved into town here 10 years ago and in a rental house, old house, 100 years old or so. And we looked in there and there's a little telephone niche in the wall, like a little cabinet where you'd put your telephone back then. And there was a little star and crescent or moon inlay on there. I thought, this is so cool. This is so appropriate. It's just like Orville Gibson. But very interesting. Now, of course, he started this company, and then oddly enough, the company kicked him out because he was a little too eccentric and too into the design and not enough into the business. And so that's sort of the way things go, but I think he was not the easiest to get along with. So a little after that, in 1922, the Gibson Company, now without actually Orville Gibson, hires this gentleman, acoustic engineer Lloyd Lohr, who refurbished their entire line of mandolins. He improved some things and made things like this instrument that he's holding, which is actually a custom 10-string mandolin, which is, it combines the mandola and mandolin. If anyone wants to geek out, we can geek out later about all this. But Lohr was just continuing this process of refining and elevating the instrument. You can see he's there with his tuxedo on. He had groups like this one that really brought the instrument to a higher level. And here, finally, it's the Mando Cello. One of the things that the Gibson Company did was to complete the consortization of the mandolin and make an official, we could have an official quartet and orchestra featuring the mandolin, mandola, and Mando Cello. So we had these direct equivalents to the orchestral instruments, the violin, viola, and the cello. And also the Mando bass, of course. How could we forget? The Mando bass is majestic. And so Lloyd Lohr, one of the things, well, many people know his name now because he made there were 170 or so instruments that he said were just the very best. And during the 1920s, he signed them like this. And these instruments now are worth like, I don't know, like $200,000 or so on, maybe more, depending. So these are really highly sought after, just top quality instruments. So he succeeded in raising the bar on the technical aspect of the instrument. And this design that he came up with, here people call it the F5 Lloyd Lohr style mandolin. And you could see this is from plans that are used here in the 21st century. So this design, it really proved to be successful. And so you can see the construction and scientific principles were something that was touted by the Gibson Company in trying to sell their instruments all over the place. Talks about the evolution of the instrument, and the idea everyone a Gibsonite was a label that people used to say that all these folks in these groups play Gibson instruments exclusively because they're so good. And there are a lot of these. Gosh, there's tons of them from Buffalo, perhaps Buffalo, New York. The Amarita Mandolin Orchestra, I'm not sure where they're from, but there are a lot of these groups. Here, the five musical Middletons. Did the Fritts family band ever dress up in costumes like this, Jeremy?
If
Oh, no.
I can see it good, I don't know. We had some pretty good costumes over the year.
They look like they're extras from talking about Disney movies. They look like from Aladdin, I think.
Oh, I don't remember that phase. We had the cowboy phase.
All right, yeah, this is kind of a niche, I think, apparently.
We
So
didn't-
anyhow, the Gibson Company really was trying to push this and make it happen, and including the Gibson Mando bass here in their catalog. I think the copy here says the Gibson Mando bass, the instrument that is so much that all praise falls behind it. I'm really not sure what that means, but this is an enormous instrument. And part of this idea to make the mandolin family equivalent to the violin family. Anyhow, so this is here's a catalog. You can see that these instruments range from maybe $30 or so up to a lot more. You could get the F4 for 130 with a faultless case. So back then, this is 1918. This is not too far from the $1 a day kind of labor market. So if you think about, that's working half a year that's fully a half a year of your wages if you're a working class person to afford one of these instruments. But the cool thing is, you could have the cheapest model, the style A or the A Junior, which is actually one of the instruments that I own, is the cheapest one they made. And it's still a really good instrument 100 years later. And that would have set somebody back maybe a month's worth of wages. Just still a lot of money when you think about it. So I wanted to just kind of, so that's this history of the business side of things. And here I want to zoom out just a little bit and talk about some virtuoso players. There's this gentleman named Jacob do Bandolim, and he was an amazing Brazilian player of the bandolim, which you might be able to surmise is very much related to the mandolin, but it's a flat top, flat back, so much more linked to the Portuguese and Spanish styles of instruments like the bandurria. But this version, the bandolim, makes sense because he was in Brazil, which was colonized by Portugal, so he spoke Portuguese. But he was just a virtuoso player. I'm not going to play one of his recordings, but I'm going to play a version of a piece that he wrote that we played with the ETSU Mandolin Orchestra. While I'm doing that, are y'all surviving? Are y'all out there?
Say hello, everyone.
I am here.
Okay, good.
Hello.
Thanks. All right, Ben, you're here. Are you in all of my classes? No,
I think I just have two or one. I'm just
Well,
in
one.
bluegrass history. Yeah.
but just today. All right. Well, good to see you, or good to hear you. All right, let me see if I can find Noitus Cariocas, which is a really rockin' piece. I'm going to go up to 34. See if we can catch it here. So one of the things that I've really liked about our group is that it's it really includes folks. We have someone in the group who was a computer science major. We had a geosciences person, in addition to the other folks from the BLUE program. So it really has been kind of a community thing. You can see we have some older folks who are involved. Jim Miller is part of he's a instructor in our program. And we had we have had community people in the past. So it's kind of like the 100 years ago thing with a whole lot of people. Maybe we'll be more successful. All right, hopefully this is going to be Noites Cariocas, which is by Jacob do Bandolim. And you'll notice it's kind of got a different feel. This was recorded in the 1930s. So this guy is kind of like the Django of the mandolin, which you could kind of makes a similar kind of sound. So check this out. This is Noites Cariocas. A really ripping solo on this. So keep your ears tuned for this.
Cool.
All right, so yeah, that is a little soft. Y'all, I tried to up all the volumes here, but I can't find any way to make it louder. Sorry about that, folks. Uh, a Jimmy Buffett
Oh.
vibe. Well, it's very tropicalia. Yeah, you know, this is choro music, which is one of the precursors to bossa nova in Brazilian popular music, and that bossa nova style is really one of the ones that's been used to evoke a tropical or beach vibe in a lot of ways. And before, like the solo cup, you know, country beach vibe. So this is a dance-worthy elevator music. Maddie, I don't know how to take that, but all right, I hear you. This is very smooth. I will tell you, there are a lot of choro players who, when they play it, and you know, they play it super fast. It's like way less elevator music and way more like finger twisting. So we can only take it at a lower tempo. But choro is very cool. Choro. Look it up. There's some amazing virtuosi of the bandolin if you want to see a different direction that all went. Now, I don't have a whole lot more slides, but I did want to mention a guy named Bill Monroe. What was the instrument that Bill Monroe is famous for playing?
Come on, guys. Come on.
Maddie dials in first with the typed. He played the mandolin, right? And he is another virtuoso of the mandolin, like this guy whose song we just played, Jacob do Bandolim. And so Bill Monroe is really this icon of the mandolin in the United States, especially among people who are interested in American roots music and in bluegrass, because he really transformed it. He took this instrument that had been used for orchestras and for playing, you know, imitations of brass bands, all this kind of stuff that we've been playing, waltzes like that over the waves. And he took the specific instrument, one of these ones actually that Lloyd Loar had signed off as like the A1 primo, best F5, top of the line instruments, worth a whole year's pay for a working class person, right? He found one of these in a pawn shop in Miami, Florida, I think, of all places. And he really, that was a part of his transformation of the mandolin from this orchestral instrument to this kick butt part of bluegrass. And for him, the mandolin was at the center of the bluegrass ensemble sound, because for him, it was really about the rhythm and the drive of it. And he felt that coming from where he produced it, which was the mandolin. And so there are all these really important individual people like these folks that I've been sort of citing and highlighting all the way along this history, who have really changed how we see and use and hear the mandolin. And I think the 100 years ago, there was this really interesting thing where all these factors came together and folks brought their mandolins together and played them. And that's one of the things that I'm really eager to get back to in the spring. My current idea is to send out music to all sorts of folks, maybe even to Jeremy or some of y'all if you're interested. So I'll just try and distribute the music and get folks to make recordings and send them in, so that even in this time of social separation and distancing, that we can come together as a community in the same way that people 100 years ago were doing, to make music together, even if we do it remotely. So that's my idea. That's my concept for the Mandolin Orchestra next semester. So stay tuned. And I have these recordings from a while ago that we've been working on, and we may actually have a CD that's going to be somehow released here before too long of the Mandolin Orchestra. So stay tuned for that. There's good stuff in the making. So that's all I got. I can play some more recordings for you if you want, or I'm glad to answer questions or hear any comments that y'all have.
Lee, we loved it. We appreciate you. Yeah, I mean, as long as you want to stick around, it would be great. We're probably not going to cover anything else today anyway. So if you'd like to stick around to answer questions or play or not, that's fine. But we'd love to have you. I think probably a lot of the students have some questions, wouldn't you think, after this wonderful presentation? Right? Students? Jackson?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
So like you might have went over it at the beginning, but I might have forgot it. What exactly like classifies an instrument as a mandolin? Because we have the little small one, then we got the big bass. What makes a mandolin?
It's such a good, it's like a philosophical question. What makes a mandolin a mandolin? All right, so you've seen the different kinds that have the the bowl back, and then the flat back, and then the carved top and back one. But there are those different ways of shaping the wood. But all of mandolins have, well, okay, I'm not going to say all, because y'all remember I showed you that chart with all those different ones. There's ones with like 20 strings on it and stuff. Some were made with gut strings early on. But as far as the modern mandolin, we have 8 strings, and using the term that y'all already were exposed to, the idea of courses, they're arranged into 4 courses. So effectively you have 4 string areas that you're playing, 4 pitches. Right? So you have those 4 things you play. You've got frets on the fingerboard that give you a place to put your finger. It's not like a violin that doesn't have any frets that you can just slide all over the place. Here you can slide, but you do have these sort of hurdles that help define where you are. It's like you're in the right space in the parking lot. You've got tuners that hold it all up there. And then you have a bridge that holds the strings up off the body of the instrument. And you play it with a plectrum or a pick. Or you can strum. Heading down south, stuff like that. Anyhow. Does that make sense, Jackson?
Yeah, it makes sense. I was just curious, like if there's any like one specific thing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
one of the things that I recognize is that we have instruments like the mandolin banjo, and so we can see, oh, it shares a lot of the characteristics of the mandolin. Like it's got the 4 courses, 8 strings. It's got frets. It's got a skinny little fingerboard. But instead of the body, the carved wooden body, we have this banjo apparatus here, right? So we can see that it shares a lot of the things that would define it as a mandolin, except it's got this really heavy banjo thing going on. And with all these hybridized instruments, you can see like what are the really important characteristics of the mandolin. Yeah, anyone else?
Were there any points in the mandolin's evolution where it was fretless? Like I know there are some like it that are fretless, but they're not like the Middle Eastern, like oud, like how that's basically the same but just larger. So I didn't know if that. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. I do know that people have in recent days made fretless mandolins. And when they do that, usually they make it single strung. So it's not a course, but just 4 individual strings. And sometimes they use nylon or gut strings. It's more easy to use it, like an oud would use. It's not really possible to have the metal strings and be fretless. It's really important to have the frets to have that clean sound. And so anyhow, there are people who do that, but I think you have to go pretty far back to find mandolins or mandolas or mandoras or these early versions of the instrument that were made in the 1600s and 1700s. Some of them did use gut strings, and some of them did have gut frets, which is what viola da gambas and lutes had way back, 300 years ago, 400 years ago. They didn't make metal frets; they made gut string frets. It's interesting to play on. It's very cool, but you have to go back pretty far to find that. There were people in the night by the mid 1800s. People were using metal frets and metal strings pretty much for these kinds of instruments.
True. And one thing to keep in mind too, of course, students, all these instruments, we talk about Lloyd Loar, some people saying perfected the instrument. In the terms of the violin, you talk about Stradivari, but a lot of these instruments were incredibly difficult by today's standards to use. I mean, we talk about, when he's talking about the gut, they tied the frets on. These instruments went out of tune like crazy. They would not hold tune. They didn't tune them as high as what we use today. They had a lower standard pitch depending on region as well. But, the performance practice was so difficult, to find. We think about some of the difficult music. We talked about the Vivaldi the Vivaldi mandolin concerto the other day. And, it's hard enough to play something like that for players today. But if you can envision having all these other variables, having strings that were made of guts, sometimes they use silk for strings on instruments as well, but having these incredibly primitive by today's standard instruments, with the lack of the metals, with the lack of the materials, with the lack of understanding of the climate control that we have today, it made it all the more impressive. It really did. And but you know, it's great. In our class, we talk about just how important it is for us to remember these things, to preserve these ideas. That's really what, you know, in many ways what Lee is doing. You know, he's bringing music to us, bringing it to the community, bringing it to the students, enriching their lives, and introducing people just like he was as an undergraduate to music that he was unaware of. And if it weren't for people like Dr. Bidgood, if it weren't, and it could be you, it could be anybody in this class for that matter, just like you, he was at one point he was sitting in a classroom like this, and he found a passion for something, and he found a passion for sharing it. So I'd encourage you guys, you know, to do the same thing. I can see that, you know, in a lot of your comments. I have students. I had a wonderful student the other day, and I won't mention his name, but thank you for sending me a comment outside of class, and we have discussions, and please do that. You know, I enjoy talking about the music, but if we don't do this, if we don't share, and you know, I heard an argument just, I think it was yesterday, about, you know, the true function. Why was ETSU established? You know, it was established to bring something to this community, and a lot of what we have here, even today, there are traditions that are exclusive to this community. I know people that have a certain sound in their playing. They have something they pass on to someone else. If we don't take care of this, and who will? And that's really important. So I would encourage you guys, we're halfway through the semester. It would not be unusual for students who are in this class to decide they want to continue. Maybe they want to play an instrument, maybe they want to take lessons. I would encourage you guys to do this. Maybe there'll be an opportunity someday to join the Mandolin Orchestra. I noticed that we had, and I didn't get a chance to comment on this, we had Sasan looked like playing percussion as well. Are you when it comes to instruments, are you fairly open to accompaniment instruments? If someone were interested in playing some percussion, or that had that experience, we could probably find a place for it, I suppose.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Sure.
So, you know, I mean, you see guitar, you see a bass. Someone mentioned the bass, but and again, the shape note singing, for instance, we have. I hope that's going to happen again. It was a real opportunity for our department, but I see that interest in my students here, and just want to, I can't really push this strong enough to tell you how important this is. If we don't hold on to our culture, we lose it. And as Alan Lomax said, I think he said 90% culture. You know, he said we're such and such percent water, and we're 100%, 90% culture, but that's who we are, isn't it? And it's really important. But I appreciate you coming out, Lee, today. And I know the students enjoyed it. It was a wonderful presentation. It's always good to hear you know, about the history of our music and where it came from. And again, thanks for what you're doing. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing, and we really appreciate it.
Well, likewise, Jeremy. Thank you. It's great to hear your thoughts, folks. It's always fun for me to hear to learn what you all hear in this music. I hear it all the time, so it's great to have some new ears on it. If you have any more thoughts, my email is my last name, Bidgood @etsu.edu. I'll see Ben at our next class time if he dials in. But the rest of y'all, if you have any questions or thoughts, if you're curious about something, I'm glad to follow up with you at some other time. So send me an email. And I really appreciate, you know, I wanted to say one other thing. I'm really appreciative for our department to let me do this kind of crazy thing. It doesn't make anybody a lot of money. You know, one of the big things about mandolin orchestras is that they're usually a community effort. They're in a community, they benefit the community. And it's not really something that it doesn't like help one person's career necessarily. So that's one of the things that I really like about music. It can be a vehicle for success and stardom and fame and money, but it can also be something that brings people together on a community level. And I think that's really important.
It was so ironic. I noticed in your discussion, you talked, Lee, about how much money could be made through the banjo. Most of us who've spent a lifetime in this, we love that joke. We certainly do. But
yeah, right.
You don't do it for those reasons. You don't, and I'm actually glad that you don't, because there are a lot of genuine, sincere people who are doing this for other reasons that are very noble and very valid. And but you don't really find a lot of people exploring traditional music, for fame and fortune. If you find an individual who's able to do that, and do it for a lifetime, they would tell you they are rich, but they're not rich in money. There are other things that there are other measures of wealth. And but this music comes and goes. We've had revivals. We're getting close to the folk revival. We had an interesting phenomenon with the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" movie. I was living in Nashville at the time and walked into Tower Records and saw a life-size cutout of Ralph Stanley, and it blew me away. But we see that it comes and goes. You see revivals of interest in traditional forms. All of them, they like fads, like bell bottoms or whatever. They come and go. But there are people, and this is the cool thing. We've talked about jam sessions this semester. We've talked a little bit about the bluegrass events, the festivals, which are kind of down right now. But through thick and thin, there is a dedicated body of people. There are certain people that stay there all the time. There have always been mandolin orchestras. Ever since they began. There have been people who, there have been sometimes very few people, but there have, and you have to kind of sometimes search them out, as Dr. Bidgood has been doing. But like I say, this tradition, it will be there, but it's for us to keep it there. Students, I don't know if any of you guys have any further questions. I do need to take roll today because I actually won't be able to get the log from Dr. Bidgood's session. So I want to make sure that I do get the roll, but I don't want to stop you if you have any further questions or comments. And we definitely want to thank Dr. Bidgood.
Yeah, I have one. What year did you say them prices were? Was it like 1890, like the $30 mandolins?
Early 1900s, wasn't it? Oh, Lee, you're muted. Your sound's off.
Oh yeah, sorry. That's probably the teens or the early 20s, that catalog that I showed y'all.
Okay, because I was just thinking about like the manufacturing process. Then would have been a lot more manual. So I done like a little inflation calculator, and honestly, for the amount of log that that would have been put into it compared to like today, if you convert $30 in 1920 to today's money, that's only $390, which
wow,
for the amount of craftsmanship is not too expensive, I would think.
No, wow, that's really interesting. No, I would have thought it would be more, but
if you bought a comparable mandolin today, made in America, you're still talking thousands. I mean, that's just the way it is. And another element about these instruments is the materials. In many cases, were different. There were things available much cheaper at that point. But there are a lot of materials that you were finding, like Brazilian rosewood, the tortoiseshell pick guards for binding, whatever. That didn't change anything. That wasn't really affecting a sound, at least to a very negligible degree. But someone might have used ivory at some point to make the nuts, the saddles, and so forth. Those materials are, if not gone, they're almost gone. That's for certain. And like for instance with Brazilian rosewood, typically when you get Brazilian rosewood today, you're getting sources that were left behind. You're getting sources that are not quarter sawn as they once were. So the instruments that were made not only were highly handmade at the time, which made them, in terms of what was put into them, very expensive, but they were made of materials that in many cases are unaffordable or unavailable today. But I do need to take roll. I know some of you folks have a class, and let me take roll first, and then I'll be glad to talk to you as much as you want to. But I want to make sure and take roll. So Anita, hello, Anita.
I'm here.
Anna.
I'm here.
Benjamin. I heard from Benjamin. Brandon.
Hello.
Talk to Carolina. I know she's here, and David. Ethan, I saw you were here. Jackson, we just heard from. Justin, you here?
I'm here.
Good deal. Caitlin, I heard from Caitlin. And what about Lachey? Lachey? Layla?
I'm here.
Lindsay? Lindsay? All right. Oh, good, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us. Maggie?
I'm here.
Mason?
I'm here.
Maddie?
I'm here.
Nicholas,
I'm here.
Rebecca,
I'm here.
Thomas, and Tucker.
I'm here.
Tucker, you here? Okay, that's all right. We've only had 2 students out today, so we had a pretty good attendance. Awesome. Well, thanks again, students. Do not forget, we do have a quiz coming up as always, and we will see everyone here, same bat time, same bat channel on Tuesday. Okay. If you need anything prior to that, let me know. I will tell you, I got all the questions that you posed to me on Tuesday answered. The exam